Booksellers webinar on how to apply for a job. My name's Caroline Carpenter. I'm Deputy Features Editor at the Bookseller, and I'm joined today by Jamie Cooper, who's Director of This Way. I'm just going to start with a couple of quick housekeeping points before we begin. The panel will last until 11 a.m, which includes 10 minutes at the end for questions. Please submit questions for Jamie via the Zoom chat channel, and make sure you select the all panelists and attendees option, and we'll try to get through as many of those as we can. You can also use the chat function to talk and swap tips with each other. If you need to communicate with the Bookseller team about something you're experiencing at your end, then please use the chat to send a message to Emma Lowe on there. If for any reason we lose connection, please stay where you are and you'll be emailed a fresh link to log back in. We'd love to hear any feedback you have after the session. And if you're chatting about this on Twitter, make sure you use the hashtag JobsinBooks. Okay, let's get started. Jamie, would you like to tell us a bit about your career background and experience?
Hi, Caroline. Yes, what I'll do is let me share my screen with you, go to the presentation, and then I'll absolutely talk you through. But thank you for having me here. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, has that come up?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yes, in terms of my background, so I launched This Way the back end of last year. Prior to that, for the last 10 years or so, I have been involved in internal recruitment, most recently as head of recruitment for Immediate Media, which is one of the largest consumer publishing magazine and content platform businesses in the country, home of Radio Times, BBC Good Food, and about 70, 80 other well-known brands covering a lot of special interest titles. It also consists of some television channels, events businesses, and various other bits and pieces. And prior to that, I was involved in internal recruitment at BBC Worldwide, which is now BBC Studios, commercial on the BBC. Prior to that, I was involved in both executive search, so headhunting, and also contingency recruitment before that. So recruitments, be it internal or external, I know pretty well. So today, what I wanted to talk to you all about was how to make yourself stand out from the crowd, how to apply for a job in the best possible way, and you know, get a head start on everyone else. Everything that I'm going to talk to you about, it really comes from my own experience more than anything else. Just in terms of context, before I left Immediate Media, we estimated that my team and we probably interviewed well over 80,000 people. You know, a lot of those were obviously content positions, given what we did, but there were a lot of commercial positions as well, marketing, etc. So, you know, interviewed 80,000 people plus at first stage, which means, you know, we probably saw close to 1 million CVs in that time. So, you know, in terms of what makes you stand out from a crowd, I think I've got a pretty good idea based on my experience. So, just beforehand, you know, everyone knows that the publishing and newspaper industry has been in a period of decline for a few years now. We've seen a lot of, you know, every year there's more and more magazines or websites that close, which means that while there are vacancies out there, it is more and more competitive. Therefore, it's even more important to really make yourself stand out. So, first things first, before we get onto the CV, in this day and age, social media and your digital footprint is so important. You know, if you're going for a position, and particularly a content position, you've got to remember that your digital footprint will follow you. You know, every now and again we see these stories in the press about you know, an actor or someone, a journalist, someone who made an ill-advised tweet trying to be funny 10, 15 years ago, and it's come back to haunt them. And I think you need to be very, very aware of that now. You know, the things that you do now, today, last year, will impact you in the future. So always have that in mind. Now, if you're going for a position in content and you're coming from universities, a lot of people would be, whether it's books, whether it's magazines, whether it's online, you need to own, a place of the internet for your own, and you need to have consistent output. So first of all, decide what you are, what your brand is, what do you want to be known as? And then, whether it could, have your own blog, have your own website, have somewhere where you can, people can interact with you, where people can come and find your latest work. And the most important thing here is to be consistent. Have it diarized that every single Monday you're going to write, I don't know, 100 words on a particular subject, and then make sure you have that consistency. So when you are then talking to future employers, you will always you'll be able to kind of signpost, what you've been doing. It's that consistent recent present that's really important. So onto the CV. Now, when I left school, I was told that your CV should be something where it's a piece of paper where you add every single job to, a bit like a car logbook, where, a logbook being somewhere where it just lists every single owner of that car. And a lot of people kind of treat that CV like that. It's a piece of paper which details their career history. That's not what a CV is. It's what a lot of people, that's what a lot of people treat as their CV, but it's not what it should be. A CV, first and foremost, is marketing. Okay, and you need to keep that in mind whenever you are writing your CV. It should be a means of marketing yourself to a future employer in the best possible way. Therefore, it's imperative that you are creative. One, that you really make it stand out. First thing I would say is don't be boring with a CV. Okay, don't be like every single CV out there that's black and white and it just is a list. Be far more creative. We are lucky enough to want to work in a creative environment. You need to embrace that and be creative with your CV. Make it pop. And then the other thing I would say is that, one of the biggest mistakes I can say is that, a lot of people think, right, I need a job. What I'm going to do, it's Monday morning or it's Tuesday, whatever it is that I'm going to do a search on Google, on LinkedIn, or on whatever it is, and I'm going to see what new jobs are out there, and I'm going to apply for all of them. I've got my CV that I always use, and I'm going to upload my CV, press send, done. And if it asks for a cover letter, I'm going to have my standard cover letter, which I'm going to copy and paste, dear sir or madam, copy in, done, move on to the next one, send it off, done, 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 done. And let's see if we can apply for 10, 20 jobs in a morning, and that's a good day's work. And for me, that is absolutely the wrong way of approaching a job search and an application, because what you're actually doing at best, you might get lucky, you might get an interview or a call back. But if you take that approach, it's a bit like winning the lottery. You might get lucky, but you probably won't. How can you therefore fix it in your favor to give you a better chance? And my advice would be is to apply for one job well than 100 badly. So, first of all, with your CV, you want to be creative. Now, mirror the advert of the job. If a job is telling you, we are looking for X, Y, and Z, your CV should kind of resemble that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the other thing is make sure you're relevant as well. Don't give them, that standard cover letter you've got saved on your your desktop. That standard CV, you need to tailor it to what they're looking for. Because if you have, in 1 minute you're applying for a job for a publishing company, and the next you're applying for a job on a magazine, and then a website, and then an events business or an advertising company, that one CV is not going to be relevant for every single one of those jobs, and you need to make it relevant, which means you need to change your CV every time you apply for that job.
That's really good advice.
Thank you. So these two CVs, now I'm not sure if you can see them properly, Caroline, I did send them to you in advance so you can drill in, but just if you look at these two CVs, I would say that these two CVs look like 80% of the CVs that I see every single day, that I've seen every single day for the last 10 years. And if you kind of just look at them, take a step back and look at them, they're fine. They're black and white. They detail who the person is. They detail, you know, a paragraph about what they do. Just so everyone's aware, from a GDPR point of view, these aren't real people. These are based on real people, so I'm not breaking any kind of data protection laws here. They're fake names. But these two CVs, they look like every single CV. Now, the question I'll ask you is that, you know, Caroline, is how long do you think someone, you know, you apply for a job that will, in the first instance, certainly in the world of content, likely go to an HR assistant or a recruitment administrator, someone in that kind of internal team. And if it's a content job, let's say, you know, and I'm talking about my experience. So, for example, when we were looking for, you know, entry-level positions on BBC Good Food or Radio Times or Top of the Pops, Lonely Planet, if it was an entry-level position, we would get hundreds of applications, hundreds and hundreds of applications. And it was the job of that person who first looks at their CV, that HR administrator, advisor, recruitment advisor, whoever it is, it was their job to kind of filter down those hundreds and hundreds of CVs to, you know, 10, which they would then forward on to the editor or whatever it was, right? That was their first job. Now, when you know, so you know, you got that person sitting there and they need to go through, I don't know, 300 CVs, right? How long do you think they look at a CV for?
This is depressing, but I'm going to guess less than a minute.
Well, if you've got, you know, if you think 300 CVs, right, yeah, and they're probably looking after, I don't know, 20, 30 jobs, maybe not as many as that, maybe it could be 5 jobs, but, you know, if you have 300 CVs and you think it's a minute each, that's 300 minutes. You know, that's half a day just looking on a first list on CVs.
Yeah.
It is, in the first instance, it's probably going to be seconds, right? What that person is doing is that if you're faced with 300 CVs, you are doing a very, very quick, you know, you know, for example, whatever the, you know, let's say it's an editorial assistant for I don't know, food publication, right? They're going to be looking for certain things, right? The editor has said these are the things that are really important. This is what I'm looking for in an application. So they will be quickly scanning that CV, looking to see if it ticks those certain boxes, right? And if it doesn't, it's going to go into a no. So what a person internally will do first of all is they're not going to be looking for CVs that are yeses. They're going to be looking for the CVs that are no, so they can filter them out. So they're scanning very quickly. Does this CV tick the boxes? And obviously, if they're more experienced, they'll do it quicker. Less experienced, they'll take more time because, you know, it's important to get it right. But the reality is, you're not going to be looking at a CV for that long. So, you know, if you're looking for 300 CVs, do these CVs really stand out? Are they really going to hit the mark? And therefore, from an application point of view, you need to make these CVs pop. You need to make them grab that person's attention so they look at them longer. I'm now going to go on to another CV, and in all the kind of 10 years that I've been doing this for me was one CV that really stood out from the crowd. Okay, now this again, it's not a real CV, but it's based on a real CV. Now, if you look at this CV, so if you're looking very, very quickly through CVs, you can see that this CV straight away will grab your attention because, for one, it uses color, right? It's, you know, it's not completely blue, which, you know, it's not obscene, but what it is there's a dash of blue, and there's a nice image. I'm not quite sure about the chemistry set being in the right image, not my choice of things, but it pops out, it grabs your attention. And you can see here that this person has, you know, got logos of former company, it's got facts, it uses bullet point and spacing well. And, you know, by and large, this for me was the CV that always stood out, really, really stood out from the crowd. Do I go into it? I do not. So let me just talk about why this CV for me, you know, really grabs that attention. You know, at the top, you've got a really nice summary of what that person, you know, does. And if I, you know, whatever job that I'm applying for, I think it should essentially mirror that job. So if it's, you know, we're looking for someone that's enthusiastic, who's passionate about this, who's got experience with this, for me, that paragraph at the top, that should really kind of mirror the application. So at first glance, someone can read it and think, yeah, this is right for the job. And then here we've got kind of a nice logo of where that person's been working. And of course, if you don't have experience, not everyone does, You know, there's an approach you can take to that. But you know, if it's looking for an entry level, you know, position, an editor assistant, they want someone that is really interested in writing about travel, for example. You could kind of signpost them to your blog where you've written about kind of the articles on travel. With any kind of content-based jobs, what people are generally looking for, tone is really, really important. You know, I had a conversation once with the editor of Lonely Planet, and he said for me, what he wanted to see in an application is someone who understood the brand, who understood, you know, he wanted to see a piece of work that looked like it could be lifted from their website or magazine, and that's really important. You understand the tone of where you're applying. And this is where if you don't have practical experience, you don't have work experience, you really kind of highlight the experience you have in the blogs that you have. But you know, fundamentally, this is, you know, where you kind of really talk about your experience here. And then the other thing that really stands this CV out from everyone else is that this person talks about about the highlights of what they've done, their achievements, rather than their duties. You know, so for example, on your course, if they're looking for someone who's done, I don't know, copyright, you know, writing, whatever it is, you know, yes, it's important to have done that, but really you want to talk about where you've really excelled in those things, because that will stand you out from the other, you know, 100 candidates who can do that kind of thing. You know, a lot of these entry level jobs, a lot of people can do them, but what they're looking for someone that can really excel in these areas, and therefore you want to talk in terms of achievements and highlights rather than you know, just in terms of duties. If you look at page 2 very quickly at the top here, this whole blue paragraph, what that is, it's referencing someone. And whilst I said right at the beginning of CV, it should be a marketing tool. It's a CV is very much about self-promotion. So therefore, if you take that to the next level and actually have someone, you know, essentially giving you a reference saying why you're great, that also goes a long way. And if you're straight out of university, you know, that could be someone, you know, your course leader, for example. If you've been, you know, you have experience in, you know, whatever it is, that could be the publisher, the editor, or managing director, or whatever it is. But someone that, when I look at CV, and I'll have that job title, and it will make you take note. You know, it's not just you saying you're great; it's someone else telling you you're great. And again, this person, for example, follows that format of, you know, experience, but here are the highlights, here are my achievements. And they use logos, and they use, you know, they talk about scale of the business publication the whole way through. And, you know, this CV at glance, you can see it pops out, it stands out. And I guarantee you, if you kind of are creative, it will make the world of difference. And I talk about creativity, but if you're going for a position, let's say, you know, you were applying for a job at McDonald's, for example, doesn't matter what the role is, if it's a job at McDonald's, if you made your CV look, you know, if you kind of, you know, had the golden arches instead of this clip art thing at the top, you used the red and yellow colors of McDonald's, or you know, maybe made your CV look like the menu at McDonald's. These are the things that, you know, this is what I mean by being creative. You know, every time you apply for a job, challenge yourself and think, does this CV really, you know, am I being lazy just uploading a CV, or am I making this CV the best possible CV it can be? You know, will it really make me stand out? Will it make someone read it? And, you know, the 300 people who are applying for a job, 300 people, you know, of those you could probably discount maybe 100 straight away for not quite having the right, you know, taking a chance. Then there might be 200 other good people. And, you know, some of them, you know, undoubtedly there's always people who are better qualified, have more experience, whatever it is. So therefore, how do you really challenge that? And it will come down to creativity and passion.
Jamie, one point that I can see a couple of people are asking about in the chat, which is something that I also thought, is that we're often told CV should be 1 to 2 pages long. What are your thoughts on that?
So first of all, 1 to 2 pages is very, very old fashioned. You know, first of all, you know, people don't send CVs through the post anymore. It's all online, you know, by and large. 1 to 2 pages, essentially what you're saying is, you know, anything longer is boring, right? Being frank. If you can't grab their attention immediately, Doesn't matter if it's 100 pages or 5 pages. You need to kind of get across what you're trying to say. Brevity is your friend. Like I said, you're only going to look at the CV very, very briefly. It's, for example, when I write a proposal to a business now, if it's not in a page, it's not worth doing because people don't read it. Generally, people are interested when it comes to CVs. All right, if I talk about my own career background, so as I laid it out at the beginning, for the last 10 years, I've been in internal recruitment. Before that, external recruitment. Actually, before that, I worked in radio. That was my first job. I worked for Heart FM on their breakfast show back in the day. But it's not relevant, right? When I'm applying, my experience now is all about recruitment and internal recruitment. Really, the fact I worked in radio, it's not relevant, so I haven't got it on my CV. So, if you did a paper round at 16, get rid of it. It doesn't need to be on the CV. If you're applying for a job of, let's say there's a job, football at Manchester United, we need someone to score 20 goals a season. If you haven't got that on your CV, but you were a defender, it's defense. It's irrelevant. People want to see that kind of relevance, and this is going back to my point about making your CV relevant. Okay, it doesn't need to be that a log, a record of everything you've ever done. It's a marketing tool. So therefore, if you can't nail it in kind of 1, 2, or 3 pages, it's not going to be right. So there's no cap in terms of length, but I would say you should aim for 3 max if you're using space well and being creative. But really, it's about the actual kind of essence of the CV is captured in that kind of first 1 or 2 pages. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
So going on to actually applying for jobs. So let's say you've got that incredible CV now that you've got that base CV that you've created and you tinker it for every single job. The next thing you need to do is that, everyone, it's how do you apply for a job? So if jobs tend to be advertised these days on websites, and I think you have a very popular jobs page, 58. When I looked at this, there were 58 jobs, which is a lot of jobs, especially given the COVID crisis we're in right now. But Google, LinkedIn are also big kind of sources of vacancies as well, and you'll find a lot of kind of websites will scrape from other websites. But people go to the Bookseller because they know it's it's an important niche, and it's where people in this space go to, and you'll have jobs that aren't necessarily available elsewhere. When you're applying for a job, I think it's important to actually read the job properly and you mirror that job. So and a job should say, we're looking for, here's one, senior associate publisher, and it's for Redwood, and which is a recruitment firm. But what it will say is that we're looking for someone to do A, B, and C, and the candidate must have X, Y, Z. Right? That's broadly speaking the format that most of adverts follow. We're looking for someone to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. It's essentially telling you what they want to see in your application. If they're looking for someone to do A, B, C and have X, Y, Z, your CV should say, point 1A, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Your application should say, I've done A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And that's really your mindset, the mindset you need to adopt when you're applying for jobs. Read the advert carefully and mirror back what they're looking for.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. That's really good advice.
Thank you. So, minimize this now. So there, and I know a lot of people, when they apply for a job, it says cover letter optional. Just a word of advice. In my opinion, cover letter is never optional, and if you don't add a cover letter, you're probably harming your chances. And a lot of people think, oh God, cover letter, I can't just upload my CV. I've actually got to take a minute and write a cover letter from scratch. People invest a lot of time, and I know people hate writing cover letters, but again, in my opinion, there's actually a format to write a cover letter, and this for me is how to write a perfect cover letter. So first of all, who do you address that to? Don't ever put dear sir or madam. It's lazy. In this day and age, with LinkedIn, with everything else, it's always possible to find who to address that letter to. If you're applying to a publishing company, you can find out the name of the publisher. If it's a website or a magazine or a newspaper, you can address it to the editor. If it's a commercial corporate role, you can address it to the managing director, whoever it is. But you can always find that name, because that person who will read, if it says dear Jamie, it's going to make me read it. Whereas dear sir or madam, it shows that they're not fully invested. So that's the first thing. The second thing then you need to do is talk about your admiration for the company, for the brand, and the values of that business. Again, if I use McDonald's as that example, if I was applying for a job at McDonald's, it'd be, dear Ronald McDonald, I'm a massive fan of McDonald's. For many years, I've loved eating your burgers. I particularly enjoy the Big Mac, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what you can actually do is then raise it slightly further by showing you're knowledgeable not just about the business, but also the competitors. So, for me, I like the Big Mac because it tastes so much better than the Whopper, for example. And you're raising your cover letter by showing that not only, this isn't just I saw the job and I thought, I could do that. It's you actually showing that you're really invested and you genuinely have passion for that business, for that brand, for that company. And by showing that you're knowledgeable, that really does elevate you above everyone else. I read so many cover letters that, dear sir or madam, I do X, Y, and Z. This is, or it would be, I match the day. We'd always look for a writer and match the day, and as you would expect, we'd have thousands of applications, because who doesn't want to write about watch football and write about football for a brand like Match the Day? And then every single application would say, this is my dream job. To be honest, that's great, but I don't really care that it's your dream job. I want to know why you're my dream candidate. So state why you're the perfect candidate. Well, why are you the perfect candidate? Well, that's actually quite straightforward, because in the advert it says that this job is looking, we're looking for someone to do A, B, and C, and in terms of experience, we want someone to have X, Y, and Z. Well, that and if you right here, well, I've got A, B, and C, and I've also got X, Y, and Z. Well, that's why you're the perfect candidate, because you're exactly what they're looking for. You take that and you add it with your passion for the brand and passion for the company, and you've gone one step further, and you've actually their values, which will be no doubt about teamwork, about whatever it is. That you take kind of these, the A, B, C, X, Y, Z, you add that with the admiration for the company, that really kind of elevates you further. Now, you can even take that one step further and give specific examples, just to kind of show, why you're that perfect candidate. If we're looking for someone to write about travel, I recently wrote an article on, a trip I took to the moon, or whatever it is. And again, the other thing is don't be boring. I read a lot of CVs or interview a lot of people, and it will, everyone will say, in the interest bit, I'm interested in cooking, travel, and reading. Everyone says those things. It's cooking, travel, reading, and occasionally gym. They're kind of the four that generally come up. If you're genuinely interested in travel, to kind of give an example. Don't say, I'm really interested in travel. Last year I went to Bournemouth. Although, to be honest, given 2020, if you did go to Bournemouth last year, that probably is quite interesting. But if you've travelled somewhere exciting, you want to grab someone's attention. So, it's the climbing count, Mount Kilimanjaro, or if it's cooking you're interested in, if you I don't know, if you've cooked monkey brains or really hot curry, they're the things that actually that's quite interesting. Me personally, in terms of my CV, in terms of personal interest, I always put, I used to have hobbies, but now I have 2 kids. And that's all I put. And then the final thing is thank that person for considering you, thank them for reading you, for reading your application. And that's essentially how you construct that perfect cover letter. And you follow that format. No one writes cover letters like this, or rarely does someone like a cover letter like this, but it can really kind of elevate your application above. It's one thing having a great CV, but actually, you know, investing time into writing a cover letter like this really elevate you above everyone else. And if you have that with the CV, I promise you, you will increase your chances of getting invited in for an interview. And the other thing that's worth noting is it's not always the CV that gets read first. It's often the cover letter. You know, I know in my experience, particularly with entry level positions, I would often read the cover letter first to see if candidates genuinely had a passion for that role, for that company, and it'd be the ones that demonstrated that would be the ones that I would then look at their CVs. So it's, you know, important to have hand to hand that really strong CV with that really well written cover letter.
Yeah. A couple of questions I can see in the chat about cover letters were, one, how do people address the letter? For example, do they say Dear John Smith, or Dear Mr. Smith? And the other question is, how long should a cover letter be?
So given my background of media, I would always say Dear First Name. I don't like that. I find, and it kind of goes a lot into my next point really is in what do you wear for an interview if you get an interview. You know, if in the world of media, it's generally quite informal, smart casuals. Therefore, Dear First Name is absolutely fine. If you're applying for a job in the city, I would probably write Dear Mister. But for me, you know, you're not going to go wrong by writing Dear Bob. It's fine. You know, or Dear Bob Jones, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you're personalizing it, it doesn't matter too much.
It's more about showing that you've taken the time to find out.
Yeah, precisely. And in terms of length, it's interesting. You know, I had a chat with someone recently who came from civil service, and in civil service, it's a different approach, a completely different approach. But so I'm not going to kind of go into that now. But generally, with a cover letter, is that you know, a page is fine. You know, a few paragraphs. You know, it's a paragraph on your admiration for the brand. It's a paragraph on why you're the perfect candidate. A few sentences if you want to provide examples, and then you're signing off. It's a page. You know, 3 paragraphs is plenty. As long as you're kind of getting those key points across.
Okay.
Now, getting an interview, being invited in for an interview is amazing, but if you don't prepare properly, you're really wasting that golden opportunity. So researching is really important. The number of people we've interviewed over the years who turn up and don't understand the brand, don't understand the company would blow your mind. If you're going in for an interview, make sure you do your homework. You know, read. You know, if it's a content business, if it's a magazine, if it's a website, whatever it is, you know, read several, you know, articles, go back, really understand, immerse yourself in that brand. That's the first thing. Secondly, immerse yourself in the industry as a whole in terms of the competition. You know, look at the competitors in that space. So if you're going for an interview at the Daily Telegraph, for example, you should kind of understand how the Daily Telegraph is different from the Times, how the Times is different from the Independent, where, you know, it ranks in the industry. And the same is true of all industries, really. You know, become an expert. That's the first thing. In terms of research, you should also use tools that are available to you. Glassdoor is, you know, is a great for a source of information on a company. For those of you who don't know what Glassdoor is, essentially it's TripAdvisor for companies. Google, use the news button, make sure you hit that, see if there's any recent stories. You know, if you're going for a job in marketing and you haven't looked at recent marketing campaigns, you might as well not turn up. So do your homework, be prepared. In terms of what to wear, in terms of my background, media background, smart casual would always be my suggestion. You know, smart jeans, shirt, blazer, smart dress. You know, that kind of thing is important. You don't want to be dressing like you're going out for a night in the town or clubbing. You know, it's not the right approach to take. But conversely, you don't want to go too far and go in a suit because it's out of kilter with the rest of the company, it's out of kilter with the industry. So for me, smart casual is always the best approach to take. And And ultimately, if you're not sure what people wear at the business, you can always phone up reception and say, hey, what do people wear? Um, at the moment, of course, all interviews are happening via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. But again, you don't want to be attending that interview in your pajamas or tracksuit bottoms. Again, smart casual. It's always, you can never go wrong by going smart casual. When it comes to talking about your experience, if you're going for a job of, and it says we want someone who's got A, B, C, X, Y, Z, that should be the focus of how you talk about things. I remember interviewing a managing director a few years ago, and for half an hour, this guy that was very, very experienced and qualified for the role talked about kind of the jobs he had when he was kind of 18, 20 years old. 20 years ago, it just wasn't relevant. Therefore, got bored, and ultimately he was no, because it wasn't relevant what he was talking about. So, when you're applying for, being interviewed for a job, talk about relevant experience and use that job spec or advert to refer back to. Competency-based questions are increasingly more common. For those of you who don't know what competency-based questions are, it's when you look at an advert and it will say, we're looking for a strong team player, or a strong communicator. These are core competencies, and sometimes it can be more important than actual experience. Therefore, you need to know how to answer competency-based questions. And it's quite straightforward. If you look at that advert and it says, we're looking for someone that's passionate, good communicator, good team player, good attention to detail. All these kind of things are things that you can't necessarily demonstrate on a CV. So therefore, in the interview, they'll ask you for an example of where you have had great attention to detail, or an example of where you've been a great team player. And the way to prepare for these is again, refer back to that advert, look at the words that you see, and then think, right, do I have an example where I was part of a great team, or demonstrated good communication? And again, it's about being prepared. And then finally, be prepared to ask questions. I would suggest you don't talk about money at first stage. Money, it's not, if they talk about it, that's fine, but I wouldn't raise money in a first stage. It should be more about the company and about the role. So, generally good questions to ask could be, why do you like working here? What are some of the challenges? Where do you see the brand developing over the next 12 months? What training's provided? What's the atmosphere like in the team? These are kind of good questions. Bad questions are things like how are the hours strictly 9 to 5? How long do I get for lunch? What's the sick pay like? These are all kind of negative questions. You really want to talk about the exciting, things that are exciting. It's about showing that you're a serious applicant, not in terms of personality, but you're a professional.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I think that you had another CV workshop that you.
Yeah, so my essentially this way, my company, the reason I set up this company was and what this way is all about is as part of my role over the last 10 years, whenever we unfortunately had to make redundancies due to a restructure, due to selling a business or whatever it was, one of the things that I would do would be go in and run workshops with people who were facing redundancies. And I would give them support in terms of creating CVs, how to apply for jobs, etc., etc. And really, what this way is all about is I partner with companies who are looking to make redundancies by going, people, unfortunately, redundancies are part of life, and if companies don't like making redundancies, and therefore they want people to leave with every bit of every support they can, and therefore what I do is I partner with companies who are unfortunately making redundancies, and I go in and I help their staff prepare for tomorrow, prepare to apply for jobs, etc., etc., etc. But I'm very, very aware that a lot of people haven't had that support over the last 12 months, and therefore I like to run free CV workshops quite regularly to kind of give that support to people who are unfortunately unemployed as a result of COVID or whatever reasons. And My next CV workshop is actually next Friday morning, 10 a.m. And if you're interested, you can find all the details on LinkedIn, or email me directly, jamie@thiswayuk.co.uk. Otherwise, you can find all the details on LinkedIn or follow this link here. And it's completely free. It's about an hour long. And by all means, feel free to register. And I will talk to you in a bit more depth about some of the things I've spoken about here today.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Make sure you check that out, guys. So yeah, now we have time for some questions. So one question that has been asked is, should people include a photo on a CV?
The answer is no. No good can come from having a photo on a CV, in my opinion. The only two industries where you should have a photo are if you are applying for a job as an actor or a model. Otherwise, it's just not relevant. You know, in this day and age, there's a lot of unconscious bias, and you know, whilst a lot of people are very, very aware of bias, and you know, you'll see more and more often that people strip names from CVs, and therefore people should be selected on the merit of their experience and their application. By having a photo, you are inviting unconscious bias, and therefore, for me, you shouldn't have photos. You certainly shouldn't have date of birth. Just not necessary.
And on a related note, someone's asking, in the era of remote working, what are your thoughts about putting a home address on your CV?
That's a good point. So if we'd done this a year ago, I would have said that on a CV, it's really important to have your location, right? If you're, you know, and for me, you know, often I've interviewed people and location was really important because I thought, you know, are you going to be able to get to the office in rush hour traffic? Now, you know, in this day and age, and in the era of now everyone working from home, what essentially is that it's proven to a lot of companies out there that you don't need to be based near where the company is. And I think personally, I think that's going forward is that a lot of companies will, you know, say, right, we will have a get together in the office once every 2 weeks, once every month, once every quarter. And therefore, what that does is that opens up the pool of candidates that apply for a job to virtually anywhere. As long as you are eligible to work in that company, there is no reason why you can't be living in Aberdeen and applying for a job in Exeter because of home working, as long as you can get there once, you know, whenever it is. So on the plus side, so do you need to have a location on the CV? Probably not now. It's not really relevant. As long as you stay, I can, I understand you're based there and I can travel as and when. I think that should be sufficient. What that means is that suddenly there's a lot more jobs open that are available for you to apply for. You're no longer restricted to just jobs in Bristol, just jobs in London. On the flip side to that, it also means that it's far more competitive now for every single job, which is why it's even more important that your CV and your application need to be that much better than everyone else's.
And as someone's asking, someone said that they have a disability that requires some working from home.
Mm-hmm.
When would be the best time to mention this?
At any point, it doesn't matter nowadays. I mean, for one, I think as I just said, work from home is very, very commonplace. That aside, having a disability should in no way stop you from applying for any job whatsoever. And there's a lot of support out there for companies to make adjustments for people who have disabilities. And ultimately, it's all about getting the best candidate regardless. So, mention it whenever you mention it if you want to mention it if they ask for it. It should be relevant almost, so I wouldn't really worry too much, and there shouldn't be anything negative in saying I have a disability, to be honest. So it doesn't matter too much because people will make allowances if they need to, and they're required to by law.
Thank you. There have been a few questions asking about the design aspects of a CV, and some people have pointed out that sometimes when you upload CVs through job submissions platforms, the formatting changes, and and they've maybe been told that algorithms can reject sort of overly designed CVs. So they were asking, is it worth doing it on that basis?
So it's a good question. In terms of my experience, we had a cloud-based system, and we didn't have any problems with design-based CVs. And I think given technology has moved on quite a lot, and therefore it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Generally now, if it's the ones where you might have problems are kind of bigger organizations that have used software that's quite old, and they'll make allowances by, you'll have to kind of copy and paste chunks out into the application, and it'll, you have all CV as a document, but it will also kind of ask you to kind of take your experience by text as well. For me, I would always go for the CV that really kind of stands out, because I think more and more companies can access those CVs, but yeah, sure, not every company will be able to look at that kind of CV, and it will come, and that's why having the really strong cover letter is equally important. Can't really answer that, I'm afraid. It really depends on the technology the company's using. But for me, having that, having a highly designed CV shouldn't be too much of an issue these days. But yeah, it's always a risk.
And on the point of how important cover letters are, someone is asking, should they be written in first person or third person?
First, always first. One of my pet hates was, and it's particularly on LinkedIn, is third person. My daughter does that a lot at the moment, who's 3. She always says, Joni likes this, or Joni wants that, and it's driving me bonkers. Always use first person. It's how people talk. But again, that's my. I remember years ago sitting down with one of the board directors and kind of the media, and saying to him, you've got to change your CV. It reads horrendously. Don't talk about yourself in the third person. So for me, first person every time, but that might be my personal preference.
And another question is it absolutely vital to have a LinkedIn account? Would an employer look negatively on someone who hasn't got one?
No, it's not vital to have one. I would say about 80% of people are on LinkedIn. LinkedIn ultimately is Facebook, it's work Facebook, professional Facebook, and in fact, you read a lot of articles, it actually seems that people are kind of losing sight of the professional and getting a lot more personal. But LinkedIn can be a massive advantage, because there's a lot of jobs that are posted on LinkedIn, and I think if you're gonna have a LinkedIn account, you need to you're going to need to approach it in the right way. Make sure you have a professional photo, and make sure you have use it as it is what it is, really. If you use it in the right way, it can be a powerful tool. Will you be disadvantaged for not being on it? No, you won't be, but it can be advantageous to be on it.
Another question is, I've heard that most jobs tend not to be advertised publicly. Is it ever advised to reach out to companies with a CV in the hope they have roles available?
Okay, so the first thing is there's no legal requirement to advertise jobs publicly whatsoever. So what you're asking essentially is should I speculatively apply to companies? There's absolutely no harm in it to take the initiative. But if you're going to do it, you need to do that well. And again, I talk about this more in more detail. We don't really have time today. But essentially, if you're going to apply for a company, again, address it. Don't do the dear sir or madam. Address it to an individual properly. Don't do it that kind of bog standard. This is my a bog standard CV, bog standard cover letter. Personalize it. Why do you want to work for that business? What do you like about that business? What can you offer them? Not it's my dream, but what do you offer them? My personal advice would be to send it to 3 different people there: the HR director, the editor, the managing director, because hopefully someone will read it. If you don't hear back from them within 2 weeks, feel free to follow up. But if you don't hear back at that point, walk away. You don't want to turn into a stalker with these things. But yeah, there's no harm in there's absolutely no harm in it, and you know what? It might just come off.
Great. A couple of questions are asking about career changes or career breaks or unemployment? How do you handle those things on your CV and covering letter and in interviews?
Just be truthful would always be my advice. You know, there's no problem having a career break. I wouldn't necessarily put the words career break because people think, well, what on earth have you been doing? You know, if you took time out to go traveling, great, say that. If you took time out, you were studying. You've been raising a family, looking after a relative, all these, it's fine. It's fine to have gaps. Just kind of explain them really. But don't leave, and you know, ambiguity isn't your friend. Yeah, you don't want to kind of give any kind of reason or doubt for someone to not want to take you forward. Sorry, I'm just following up from that. It's again, it's that if you're asked in an interview, you know, a question and you don't have an answer, again, be truthful. Don't try and make something up because you'll get found out.
And someone's asking, is it necessary to have your own blog or Bookstagram? Yeah, they said, I'm aware it's great to showcase who you are, but is it a deal breaker?
No, it depends on the job. For one, you know, if you're applying for you know, I think if you're applying for a content job and you have a blog, that's great. But it's one of those things that a blog is useful if you don't have any practical experience, because it just shows that you have that consistent output and that you're passionate about writing. If you don't have a blog or somewhere that you publish work and you don't have experience, what do you have that makes you stand out from everyone else? So it's really just about increasing your chances of getting that role. And you know, it's, you know, a year ago, work experience was always very, very important to have internships or work experience, but people aren't going to have work experience over the last 12 months because companies haven't been in, you know, working from companies. Therefore, a way of bypassing that need for work experience is to have those blogs. You know, ultimately, all these things are a means to an end.
Yeah, sure. As someone else is asking, should you apply for a job if you meet most but not all of the requirements?
So often jobs, they'll state, it'll be like a wish list, what we're looking for. You know, we want A, B, C, D, X, Y, all these things in terms, and often, you know, that person doesn't exist. You know, and sitting on the other side of the fence for many, many, many years, you know, we would kind of get these wish lists and publish them. And, you know, it could take ages and months and if not years to there's a job that I've seen posted recently from a former company that, you know, I know they've been looking for that role for the last 2 years. And, you know, and it'll often be because it's a very, very narrow skill set they're looking for. So, you know, should you apply for a job if you don't tick all the boxes? Absolutely, because you don't know, you know, a lot of times someone, you know, a company will advertise for a job and they might interview you and think, actually, you're better than this role, or actually we really like you, we could create a role for you, or we can change the role slightly. And you know, there's been many instances over the years where I've started looking for A and we've ended up actually realizing that we don't want A, we want B, in terms of the job. So yes, you should, you know, if you don't apply, you're not going to get the job. Simple as that.
Yeah, very good point. We are almost out of time, but there are a few questions kind of asking for a bit more detail about covering letters. So someone said that with a lot of publishing roles, they don't have many requirements for experience. So do you have any tips for what to write when the required experience is a bit vague? And someone else has said that they've always tended to try and hit all of the person's skills and experience criteria with examples. Should they be doing this, or is it more about selecting one or two with achievement examples?
So in terms of, you know, if they are vague in terms of what they are looking for, you really should, my advice would be to demonstrate passion for the brand, and kind of, you know, and I would then sell your experience your skill set in relation to what the role is. But ultimately, person's character is really important, and if you can mirror the values that they're looking for, or particularly show your knowledge and passion, goes a long way, and can really stand you in good stead. In terms of how specifically should you answer every single point in a cover letter, no, I personally wouldn't. I would answer the main ones, and then kind of signpost them towards your CV where you can demonstrate in a bit more detail, if that makes sense. It's about being selective. You don't want to, a cover letter to be 15 pages where you're detailing examples of every little thing, because it's not going to be read, honestly. Cover the main things, signpost back to that CV.
Okay, great, thank you. We maybe have time for one more question, and I will ask one of the questions that I prepared that might be helpful for people. Are there any other sort of resources or sites that you would suggest people check out for further advice and tips?
There's, at the moment, there's a lot of people offering advice and tips. My personal advice would be to, depending on the job, if you're going for content jobs, I could follow, kind of the celebs of that world, the editors or whatnot, and a lot of them are posting advice at the moment on how to apply for jobs. There's a lot of free advice out there on LinkedIn, a lot of contradictory advice on LinkedIn. And again, ultimately, it's going to be about people's opinions, and everything I've told you today is my opinion based on my experience of media and commercial content businesses. Whereas someone else in my position might tell you completely the opposite of what I've said. There's a lot of advice out there. For more detail, feel free to attend my free webinar next Friday morning, 10 a.m. Feel free to register, and we can go through things in a bit more depth then. But yeah, there's a lot of free advice everywhere, on the internet, in magazines, on the TV these days. Consume as much as you can and cherry pick what's relevant would be my advice.
Thanks, Jamie. That's a great note to end on. Thank you everyone for watching. Thanks also obviously to Jamie for joining me today and sharing your great advice. Don't forget to check out Jamie's free CV workshop next Friday, as he said. This video will be available to watch again on the Bookseller's YouTube channel. So make sure you share that when it becomes live. And don't forget to sign up for our Jobs in Books emails and check out the Bookseller's careers page and jobs board too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.